just start out today, if that's all right with all of you, and just get the ball rolling since we have limited time. We've thought about what's been happening, and we have these back and forth questions, and we just feel like we're not making progress, and we really want to make progress, and I think you all do too. I think we all want progress, and so we have a couple of things that we need information on, and that is it. And we're just going to focus, we're going to hone in on 2022 because that's what we have to do at this moment. And we've got a suggestion for beyond that that we'll share with you in a second. We know that elections and access to elections and free and fair elections are really important, and we have, as you know, as you can tell by our agendas, we have lots of vital and important issues that we deal with on a regular basis, a daily basis, really. We did hear that there was a decision made about early voting satellite locations. We can't find the record of the meeting, and we just hope that early voting site considerations will be handled in public meetings and discussed publicly. And by Indiana statute, we believe it is you all, the election board, not the party chairs, who make this decision. So we just ask that this happen in the future. And it's not appropriate for us, of course, statutorily to assign satellite voting locations. If we can help you secure those sites, we are very happy to do so. If you need additional funding from council for poll workers or staff, we will be happy to go with you to council to request the money as your partner. And if you need to have a study done for early satellite voting locations, obviously it's probably not going to happen for 2022 at this point, please bring us the contract. Again, if we need to go to council for funds, we're happy to do that with you. And all these things are things that we don't do and should not do, and statutorily you all do, but we are here to support you in every way that we can. We did note that every clerk that from other counties in Indiana that came to our meetings to talk about these issues, all of them had early voting satellite locations. And so we do hope that the community can help move this forward as well, and encourage folks to work toward that as soon as possible. So we've talked a lot about a ton of things, and we don't seem to be making progress. And so we've whittled it down to two very specific things that we know we need for 2022. And at this point, that's what we need to focus on, is 2022, not beyond that. And again, I'll talk about that in a second. We need to get spaces prepared. We need to be ready. And it is November. So the question one, issue one, is which spaces do you want to use? Your current space, Johnson Hardware, your current use is 3,844 square feet. Napa building is 5,000 square feet. North Showers is 2,702 square feet. So rudimentary math, 11,546 square feet, which is 3 times the space you have now, which is only just shy of the 12,000 square feet of space that we heard earlier. So we believe that this is, it's not ideal, but this is what we have available in 2022. So we need to know which, we're assuming you want to use Johnson Hardware, but which additional spaces do you want to use? That is up to you all to decide. I don't know if you want to do that today or at your next election board meeting, but we need to know as soon as possible. And again, we encourage you to please consider early voting satellite locations for residents in the city, and also for those who live outside the city and work outside the city. The second part, so the first part is which spaces. The second question is, we need to know what needs to be done to those spaces that you choose For any remodeling, if there's any request for remodeling, we need to get that figured out as soon as possible, whether that's doable, viable, and how quickly we can do that. And also security, and that includes both cameras and access. Okay, so key card access, do we need dual access? Where do we want cameras? How many cameras? These are the only two questions we're going to focus on at this point, because we don't want to get mired down in volleying more questions back and forth. So Ms. Purdy is going to send you all these two questions, these two issues, to your emails, to all of you on email, and then we're going to ask that you respond to us whenever you made that decision, again, whether it be here today or at your next election board meeting, but the sooner the better, obviously. And we have made Greg Crone available to you to, again, walk through any of these other two spaces, North Showers or Napa, and to walk through those spaces and work on any issues or any, talk through any of the use of the space, and we can work with you on that. So for the future, so we're not ignoring the future, but after 2022, we think it would be useful for a commissioner, the chair of the election board, Ms. Wheeler and Ms. Purdy to meet and create a series of recommendations or a set of recommendations for post 2022. And if that works for y'all, I think we can get moving a bit quicker and more expeditiously and in a much more practical way doing that. So that's where we are at, and we really need to focus on which buildings and what you need done to those buildings.
I am going to defer to Professor Rana to start as the president of the election board.
Okay, thank you so much, both Commissioner Thomas and Clerk Brown. So I guess just to start off with, I just object to the framing. I mean, it's not, I think it's very positive that you've acknowledged and noted that you're not in charge of deciding where satellite locations are. But at the end of the day, it sounds like what's happening is that you're refusing to consider the clerk's proposal, submitting alternative plans, and then setting parameters for what you will and will not consider, when actually the role of the commission is for the clerk to make plans for elections, plan the elections according to statutory authority, and set up how elections work, and then submit to the commission requests for space. And saying that you're only looking at one date, you're not looking at the future, or are just offering different spaces and wanting to know how that works, like, again, is sort of the reverse of how this is all supposed to work, right? I mean, I think enormous amounts of time and research and, effort have been spent producing a plan that meets the requirements for the election, and that plan is just not being considered.
Okay, so we saw one plan, which was to use the entirety of Johnson Hardware Building. That is not going to happen in 2022. So that's why we're saying, let's move forward with what we do have and what we can actually do.
So I think it's great that you're acknowledging that you're not going to approve the clerk's plan for 2022. I think acknowledging that is a step forward, but that doesn't say anything about, the future is an important part of these discussions. Because any plan that would be agreed to now is a temporary one, and you can't make temporary plans without having any idea of what the future is. And I think going back and saying, well, do more analyses and come up with different plans and whatever, is just pushing the burden back onto the people who have already come up with the plans and done all of this research and done something, and is just sort of pushing accountability off and, moving things forward instead of responding again to the requests that have been made.
May I follow up, please? I know that we can't have people speak on this meeting, but I do note that Guy Loftman is on this meeting. And, you know, I think one of the serendipitous things about this being on this particular meeting was that he actually did submit what I think is a very good lead into discussion regarding not making any changes for 2022 election cycle, but making sure that we are on track for 2023. I thought he presented a very well-composed piece of correspondence to you, and I'm hopeful that you're at least open to that discussion. I can say for me, when you say, let's get together after this and do a commission, it feels like we're going back behind closed doors, and then, you know, you'll take what we give you and you'll love it. That's how it feels. If that's not what your intent is.
No, that's not the intent. The intent is to move forward as quickly as possible now to figure out what to do for 2022. We have almost 12,000 square feet to offer you. It's not in one building. It's not under one roof. We understand that that's not what you want, but we do have almost 12,000 square feet of space for you, 3 times what you had in the last election. And that space is available to you. We need to know if you want that space and if what modifications we need to work on, because that is going to be the way to move expeditiously, because we don't want to fall short time-wise on preparing for 2022. That's what we're focused on right now. And that's what, yeah.
So I believe that on the previous work group that I indicated that I was amenable to the temporary use of both of those spaces that you offered, one
Right.
for our voting equipment, the other for the, and poll worker training, sorry, and then the other for processing our mail ballots. And we did begin to talk about security.
Okay. Good.
I do believe that we said that, and if I'm not mistaken, I'd certainly have to ask Ms. Sherry to review the minutes with me. I believe I articulated that to the election board at our most recent meeting when they asked for an update. And if I'm also not mistaken, I thought I saw correspondence among a few people on the meeting for a tour of the Napa space. So I guess I thought we already were moving toward the use of that space on a temporary basis. And so
Right.
I'm not sure how we got back to you weren't clear that we were interested.
Okay, that's what we needed to know. And if that decision's been made, awesome. And I know that Greg Crone is happy to work with all of you, yes, to do a tour, to look at the security issues, card access, cameras, whatever it is that you need, we will figure it out. But the sooner we know that information, the better, because it is very hard to find contractors right now to get things done. So there may be things that are beyond our control. We can't promise anything, but we can promise that we'll look at it and we'll do whatever we can to make the space usable and viable for what it is you want to do. So I think, so are we then all set for 2022?
I mean, I think we need an answer as to your response to Mr. Lofgren's proposal, number 1. And then number 2, is this going to be temporary or not?
We're talking about 2022 right now, and we need to talk about future elections at another time and place, whether that's as a whole group or whatever it is. I'm just concerned that we move forward and that we have a very clear understanding of what it is that needs to happen to prepare for next year. our biggest concern right now is 2022. And then we will, yes, we'll have to keep talking about what happens afterwards. And I think that would be incredibly useful. And we have, they're moving Greg Crone to panelist right now, hopefully. And so if you all have questions for him, I know that he would be very happy to address those right now about any of the spaces that are available.
Well, I guess the question goes back to, we can't talk about 2022 without knowing whether it's temporary or not and what's going forward. And the clerk's request, the clerk's original request was not for 2022 alone. It was for moving forward in general for the elections. So limiting it to 2022 means you're not addressing large portions of the clerk's request, and we're not able to move forward because we can't decide on 2022 if we don't know whether it's temporary or not. So if you're saying you're rejecting all of the requests, then I think that should be very clear. And I think that you should state that.
That's certainly not what we're saying. And my colleagues can correct me if I'm misunderstanding our position, but that's certainly not what we were saying. But our concern is that we get caught up in knowing what we're doing in 2023 and 2024. And that is important. But we want to make sure 2022 is set before we start talking about anything else. That doesn't mean that this is going to be the way it is. Clearly, this is something we're going to have to continue to talk through and to determine, especially for 2024, because that is the next presidential election, how we're going to address space needs. But we certainly can't say that that X is going to happen or Y is going to happen, because our focus right now is making sure that the next election you have, and you have almost 12,000 square feet of space. And I don't think any of us, and again, my colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think any of us are in a position to say that that this is how long this will last. I don't anticipate it lasting long, honestly, myself, but I don't know that because we don't know. We have other buildings and other facility needs, and we have to figure out what we're going to be doing. And so to give you an answer today would be a guess, and I can't give you an answer today. But clearly this is an important priority consideration for us, and it is something we are going to look at. I think we need to have more than here's how we would use Johnson Hardware if it were all ours, because I don't think that it would be fair to the election board or to the clerk if, for example, the probation department said, we want to use all of Johnson Hardware, and we just said, well, we're shooing you out because they said it first. We don't know what's going to happen to Johnson Hardware, and we don't know what's going to happen with our criminal justice reform study and how we're going to implement it, and whether or not we need additional building. And if we do, how we're going to affect that. And so there are a lot of plates spinning at this moment, and we cannot give you address anything with certainty today for 2024. But I don't know if my colleagues want to answer that question.
Well, I think you answered my question, but I just want to clarify and just rephrase it so we're really clear. And so the question is, are you refusing to make any commitments beyond 2022, yes or no?
Commitment to what? Yes, we are committed to looking at this and continuing to work through this issue. Yes, we are committed to that. But to commit to specific space or a specific building, we can't do that today.
Okay, so the answer to
what it does is if we focus on that, then we're not preparing for 2022, and that's our concern.
Well, my concern is addressing the clerk's request, and as you know, it's not up to you to determine the scope of what the clerk's requests are, is what I'm saying. So, and I think you've answered it, right? I think you were saying today definitively that you are not making any commitment about space beyond 2022, that you're refusing to make any commitment about space beyond 2022.
We cannot today know what we're going to do with what building. We can commit to continue to work on this issue. 2024 to us is the biggest concern because that's the largest, the next election that's very large, right? It's the presidential year. And so clearly we want to have this worked out. We want to have this settled. That is our goal, to, as you know, to satisfy as many people as possible. We recognize that the clerk is requested to use the entirety of Johnson Hardware Building. We cannot do that in 2022. We're offering square footage of almost 12,000 square feet, you know, and that hopefully is going to be what will get us through this next election, and we can know more about what our priorities need to be and how we can make this work. So we are committed to working on this. We're not going to commit to a particular building. We are committed to continuing to review whatever requests come our way from the election board. That's our commitment.
Okay, so the commitment is to commit to working more, but not to commit to any particular space allocation, whatever that may be, beyond 2022.
That's right, but we do want to start working on the future right away. We don't want to wait.
And then my follow-up question is, then I understand what you are saying to be a rejection of Mr. Loffman's proposal.
Did you ever vote on that yourselves
We,
publicly? Take a vote?
so I'm asking if you are even considering it, which is a different question as to whether you approve it. Have you reviewed it or thought about it, or? Because we asked that question earlier.
Well, I know I read it, but that it wasn't read as something coming from the election board. It was read as something coming from a resident who has some experience in these matters, who has a suggestion. And that's very different from a request coming from the election board. So if you all are putting forward that request, then you have to decide whose request you're putting forward. We would like one request, and we would like to work with the election board to come up with a series of recommendations. And I think it's easier to work with a series of needs listed, you know, have needs listed out rather than saying we want this building, because that is very hard to do given the circumstances of where that building is and what's housed in it. So it would be much better for us to work with you and to have a series of needs specified rather than we want X building and we want this, to say this is how many cubic square feet of storage we need, and this is the kind of security it requires, and this is how much space we need for training, and this is, you know, that is much easier for us to work with. And it allows us to be much more flexible in our planning.
But I guess I don't understand, like, again, going back to two things, you know, your role in this isn't to assess different voting locations or how they work or what space would be used for. It's to accept or deny the clerk's request. And so what I hear you saying is that you're denying the clerk's request.
No, what I am saying is not that we're denying any request. What I'm saying is our role is to assess requests for space needs and to determine whether or not we can make those happen and how we can make those happen. And oftentimes, our department heads will come to us and request something, and they may not get exactly what they want, but we certainly work with them to come up with the very best solution. What you do with that space is up to you. However, if somebody said to me, hey, I want some downtown prime real estate so that I can store boxes of files, we would say that is not an appropriate use for downtown real estate. Let's figure something out. That's just an example. And so in some ways, how the space is being used, for example, is the space going to be used 1 month out of the year, or is the space going to be used all year round? That will have an impact. What happens during that month or all year round is up to the department. But we certainly are responsible for providing space based on requests to the best of our ability. And it doesn't mean that we can magically make every request happen, because if we did, county government would look very chaotic in terms of its space usage right now, because we do have a lot of departments that are using a variety of spaces, and we take time to work with architects to utilize the space as effectively as possible to help the department out, not to tell them what to do, but to help them out and to utilize the space as efficiently as possible. Downtown space is a premium, even though we do have North Showers building with great parking, and we have a lot of other buildings that we use, but we have departments that are spread all over the county buildings. Not ideal, but that's what they've had to work with, and we've made it work. And so we work with departments to consider their requests, to figure out what needs to happen, to make sure that we do it as quickly as possible if it's needed to be done quickly. And we just want to be as efficient in our use of space across the entire county as possible. So we certainly aren't going to say no to a request, but just like every other department, we need to work with that department to figure out how to make that request happen and how to make those space needs, how to meet those space needs as best as possible.
Well, I guess I'll go back to the beginning again, which is, you know, I guess even in your hypothetical example that you gave, you still responded yes or no and said what you were going to do with the request that was presented. And part of the clerk's request was to have a path forward, that it wasn't just 2022, that whatever arrangements, because it's so late in time, in part because these discussions have been going on for so long without any real results, that whatever has to happen for 2022 has to be temporary, but it has to be with a path in mind going forward. And, you know, and earlier you said there was no path, like you were not going to commit to any path for going forward.
We just said that we would like to hold meetings with a small group to create recommendations that can then be brought to a public space for further discussion. If you all want to have these working group meetings and have all the work being done here, that's fine too. That's up to you all. But we've got two different paths forward. We continue the working group meetings and we continue to work on future elections, or we have a smaller group that meets, that comes up with recommendations that can then be brought to the public meeting for further discussion and revisions.
So what would be the purpose? So this is what I'm asking. So the clerk has already done a lot of research, presented a plan. What would be the purpose of a working group to, you know, like we're just getting back to a refusal to make a commitment, and it's nice to intend to make a commitment in the future, but that's not the same thing as making a commitment.
I understand what you're saying.
So I just want to be very clear, right? That you're just intending in the future to possibly make a commitment, but that is very different from making a commitment today.
We cannot make a commitment today to give the clerk the entirety of Johnson Hardware Building, or to give the election board the entirety of Johnson Hardware Building. We cannot make that commitment today. So no, we cannot commit to that. But usually when we get requests, we don't get requests for, we want this whole building, we want this whole space. We get requests for, we need more room for XYZ, and we figure out a way to make it happen. That's more typically how things work. So we can work with, we are happy to work with the election board, the clerk, whoever, on a request relating to space needs. We cannot commit today to say, oh, Johnson Hardware is going to be your building as of X date. We cannot commit to that.
So the answer is no.
I believe
Can
I've
you
answered
confirm?
that. We
Confirm?
cannot commit to Johnson Hardware Building belonging to the election board at this moment. It may happen, it may not, but we cannot commit to that today. We have, we want to see requests that are related to square footage or when it's storage, cubic feet of storage. And we need that information. And when we have that information, we are really happy to look at a lot of options. It doesn't mean it has to be only one way, but it means that that's how you begin negotiations. That's how you begin working toward a solution. And that solution may or may not be the building you want, but it is certainly going to be a commitment that we've all made and we continue to make to addressing the space needs of the election board.
So I think it's unfair to say that negotiations need to begin, because I think negotiations have been continuing for a very, very long time. However, just to go back and clarify, so is it correct that you're also not committing to the first floor of the Johnson Hardware Building for Election Central?
You have the current space on in the Johnson Hardware Building. We've also offered you two additional spaces, and the total of those 3 spaces is 11,546 square feet. That's what we've offered. That is our commitment for 2022.
So the answer to the question of, is the whole first floor of Johnson Hardware Building available to Election Central? The answer to that question is no. Is that correct?
Not for 2022. Not for 2022. We can't make that happen. There's no physical way to make that happen. I'm sorry.
We're trying to clarify your positions. So.
Well, I'm sorry that this isn't the ideal, but again, you know, we can't make everything happen.
So I have a next point of clarification. When we asked if you were considering Mr. Lofgren's proposal, that was something submitted to the commissioners, not us. And then I hear Penny asking if we had voted on it. So again, that's sort of always pushing back everything on us. But I just want to know where are the commissioners on that at all? Like, what are your plans?
Here's the thing. We hear from a lot of residents, and a lot of them have great ideas, and we oftentimes will take their suggestions and run with them, and sometimes we can't, and it depends. But we certainly, I don't think you want us to consider and you know, I appreciate that it was a well thought out idea, but I don't think that we should take that as your request, because it's coming from somebody who is not on the election board and somebody who does not work for Monroe County. It's not a department head. We take our information from department heads and from the election board in this case. What is the request? Well, we've had a request to use the entirety of Johnson Hardware Building. We cannot do that right now, and we may not ever be able to do that. So now the question is, what square footage do you need, and how can we make this happen? And so it sounds like, and I have not gotten an answer to this yet, are we all on board for our plans for 2022 at this moment?
I mean, I think I'll defer to the clerk, but from my opinion, from you know, speaking for myself, the plans for 2022 were contingent on a path forward for the future, because it's really important to understand before you modify space and before you do all sorts of things as to whether it is temporary or not. And we want to avoid wasting taxpayers' money. And we also want to do the best we can to secure the elections and not do something, you know, kind of haphazard at the last moment, or that's just kind of temporary. And all of those things require planning. And I think that's been clear from the beginning.
Well, but again, our question is, if you all want to use that space that we've offered for 2022, we need to know that, and we need to know specifically the modifications that are being requested so that we can get to work on them now.
But how do you know all of those things if you don't know if it's temporary or not? So that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't go forward without giving answers to the questions that require answers to move forward, which is why we just keep moving in circles.
I don't know why you need to know what's going to happen in 2030 or even 2024, or even 2023 to make an election work in 2022. That to me does not make sense. I understand you want to know. We would love to know. I don't have a crystal ball. We have a lot to work through in terms of determining a permanent solution. We are committed to that permanent solution. We have been committed to that. But right now, our concern is making sure that we can get 2022 settled. And it doesn't sound like we're even there yet. And that really worries me. I don't want to talk about 2023 until we talk about 2022.
I mean, I guess you're making it sound like there's hypotheticals in the future, but we all know that, 2024 is a pretty significant year. Everybody knows exactly what's happening in 2024. So it's not a hypothetical as to what might happen in 2024. We know that there's going to be a presidential election.
Right. So why do we need to know what's going to happen in 2024 to make sure that 2022 is all set to go? I hope not, because we need to make sure that we're ready for 2022, and that if there is any modification that has to be made, that we're making it and we're working on it now. And if the election board is saying that you will not work with Mr. Crone to figure out how to use that space until we make a decision about 2024, that's on you. I hope that that's not what you're saying. I can't imagine that's what you're saying.
Commissioner, I know, we're not saying that. When I just said that at the last meeting, or the correspondence that I saw was for a tour of both spaces so that we could let you know what we need. You have to know, you are such a smart woman. I know you know that that's not what we were saying.
Okay, awesome. I want to make sure that I'm clear on that. So I know that Mr. Crone is on and he's willing to meet whenever with whomever, as soon as you would like to meet, to go through those spaces and to get that information together. I'm sure we can get technical services there as well, because this also concerns cameras and security and things like that. So that's awesome. So are we set? It sounds like we're set for 2022. I just want to get a yes from folks, and then we can figure out, and we have a suggestion for how to move forward beyond 2022. It is our commitment. I'm making my personal commitment. I know my colleagues are on board. We are committed to coming up with a solution for the future. This is for 2022. We just need to make sure that we're all set.
So again, I'll defer to the clerk, but from my perspective, it sounds like everyone here is committed to thinking about how things might work for 2022 and committed to working on plans for 2022, but that's not the same as agreeing to temporary or whatever the plans are for 2022 without knowing what the path forward is.
Can we follow through with plans to tour the space and talk about the security, talk about what our needs are?
Mr. Crone, do you want to talk through that process?
Yes, that's no problem. Sorry, my picture is a little fuzzy here. I can reach out to Hallmark Properties tomorrow, the property manager of the Napa property, and get that scheduled. And I'll reach out via email and we'll get it scheduled that works best for everybody's schedule. So I'm sorry.
May I suggest, this is for the benefit of the election board. We are very, very quickly coming up on the holidays and our next meeting. So what if we recessed rather than adjourned from our next election board meeting to make sure that we can all look at the space and all discuss our, what we need. One thing we've made clear is that with voting equipment, the storage of the voting equipment in a place where the, very visible and accessible by the public, that we would be talking about the Cadillac of security systems to make sure that nothing untoward happened. And so that's going to be my proposal, to just move the ball forward today.
Good.
I understand what you're saying, Commissioner Thomas. I believe the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. And, it's just unfortunate that, we're in a place where there's some hesitation about whether or not we're all brokering in good faith. And it, as somebody said at a recent meeting, that's our dirty laundry and that's where we are. And I just want to be sure if there is a path forward, I think we can make it work. But we'd like to at least know that there's a path forward. Otherwise, we're doing all of this work for nothing. And the final thing that I'll say is I did reach out to the architect who came to visit us recently this morning. He is working on a written summary that I would love to share with the commissioners to open the discussions, but I do want them to continue. I do want them to be public because I feel like it's, I feel like it's important. This is history. What happens here is going to be historical, not only for me as clerk, making sure that I'm the first clerk to have the adequate spacing to oversee an election, but for future clerks. And we're not even talking partisanship here. I don't know the future clerk, but we're really at a point where if we don't do this now, when? Kicking the can down the road is not going to, it hasn't worked. It didn't work for Jim Fielder, didn't work for Pat Haley, didn't work for Linda Robbins. It's not working now. And we want to not kick this can down the road. And that's what my fear is. I'm only speaking for Nicole Brown.
Right. And I hear you and I appreciate you. I don't think anybody has not been working in good faith. So I disagree with that. I believe we have all been working in good faith, but I believe that just because we cannot achieve an ideal that of one particular building, but we have found 12,000, in total of almost 12,000 square feet, that should address the needs for 2022. And again, it may not be exactly what everybody wants, and that rarely happens anyway. But I believe we have worked really hard, and I know that we are all committed. I know Mr. Crone's committed. I know Ms. Purdy's committed. I know all three of us are committed. We are going to make this happen, and we are also going to continue working. This isn't about kicking the can down the road. This is about finding a solution for 2022 that has a large number of square feet. And I think we all need to work toward, I look forward to seeing that proposal from the architect, but we need to look at space needs, not by building, but by actual needs for actual functions that you wish to perform in that space. And then we can address that. And it may be that building and it may not be that building, but we are certainly very willing to make things happen. And we will continue to do so into the future. And I can give you that commitment from all of us because I know we have talked through this a lot and we are all committed to this. All right. So it's almost 5:15. So I think we have a good plan moving forward. Right. Okay. All right. Great. I appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you all.
Thank you.